What's up, guys, and welcome back to AMC. I know you've all been asking me for the reviews, and we are finally getting to it. Today we are going to be talking about the 4th chapter pack in the Westeros cycle No Middle Ground. Now, overall, I feel this was a very, very strong pack, potentially a meta-defining pack based on the results of the tournament that I went to last weekend. Some really, really strong cards in here that are fundamentally going to change the way you have to build your deck and think about the game. And I think a lot of newer 2.0 players, this might be a little bit frustrating. Specifically, I'm talking about First Snow of Winter. So for us older players that have been around for a long time, we're sort of used to the fact that a pack is going to come out that's going to contain a card that is going to change how we have to think about the game, like as a whole. So once First Snow hits, 3-cost characters and below, things that generally people have been really, really excited to use, are now much, much more of a liability to put in a deck. And that is really going to change how you have to think about deck building. And that's going to be a little bit abrupt for brand new 2.0 players. They're not used to a paradigm shift like that. Players that have been around for a long time, we sort of get used to that now. And it's not that we're okay with it, but we understand that that is part of how Thrones develops over time. The same strategies and the same decks that you're using today probably aren't going to be valid 2 or 3 months from now based on the new cards that are released. And First Snow is a card like that, but we'll talk about that a little bit further in the individual card reviews. I also wanted to take this opportunity to officially welcome Lauren Fitch into the AMC team. She's been doing great work with helping us research topics for these reviews and giving insight into why she thinks cards are good or bad. I really, really wanted Lauren involved right from the start because generally her and I disagree on almost everything when it comes to Thrones. I think Lauren is more of a rush player as far as her deck preference. I'm more of a control player, so her and I have drastically different views on the values of cards, and she has a really good perspective on the game that I wanted to be involved in the channel. So thank you, Lauren, for joining us. Also, if you'll notice behind me here, I rearranged my apartment a little bit. So I had my daughter over here this weekend, and she was complaining she didn't have enough space to play, so we moved the couch, got a little different configuration here. There's the cat. You guys will see more cats in the future, but that's what I got. Maybe I'll put something on the TV in the background, see if I can't get a copyright claim on one of these videos, but... So just wanted to address that difference that you guys have a different view from now on. And you'll see more cats. Everybody seems to love the cats. Maybe I should do an introduction video on the cats. In fact, let's see. The white one hates me, but let me see if I can get her. Come here. This is Ghosty. She hates me. She hates all people. She loves her sister. That's about it. Very lonely. Sticks to herself. Doesn't really like snuggles very much, unless it's on her terms. The only time she jumps up to me is when I'm in bed. Come here, Mira. Come here, baby. This is Mira. She loves me. She loves everybody. Loves people. Hey. And she is a maniac, as I'm sure you've seen her running around in the background of all these videos. A little wild girl. That's why we named her Mira. A little huntress. All right, baby. Say hi to the people. Bye-bye. Mwah. So there's the kitties. More kitties. I know. Everybody always wants more kitties. More kitties. Today, we're going to be talking about the Stark cards from No Middle Ground as part 1 of our review of the chapter pack. Some of the things that I want to do when I do card reviews that nobody else really is doing right now is talk about the history and lineage of the cards back in 1.0 and even the CCG days. So the first thing I want to do is talk about Hodor. Hodor is a card that has a lot of history in this game. When I was doing research for this video, I found 2 previous versions of Hodor in the CCG that I was not familiar with, but I played 1.0 very extensively, so there's also a 1.0 version that I wanted to show as well. So you've got your CCG cards over here and your LCG card over here, and I just wanted to put those up before we start talking about the 2.0 version. The 2.0 of Hodor is a 2-cost Bicon. He has 4 strength and no attachments. He cannot be declared as an attacker unless you control Bran, which is very thematic. I really love that aspect of Hodor. And he does not contribute his strength to dominance, which, again, I think is a fair trade-off. given his cost to strength ratio. There's a lot of really good things that I like about Hodor. First and foremost, obviously, he is super efficient. So, 4 strength for 2 gold is very, very efficient, and I really like that aspect of this card. Very good on setup at 2 gold as well. In terms of format use, I don't really see a big difference in value between the Joust and Melee format for Hodor. He's equally good in both formats, I think. Interesting to note, Hodor is loyal, as he should be. That's very thematic, so people who are bannering with Stark will not be able to use Hodor. I really like this move by FFG. You can't give super efficient characters like this to every house, so making him loyal was the right move in my opinion. I don't think the downside of him not being able to attack unless Bran is in play is going to be that much of an issue for Stark players. I think Bran is so good in 2.0 that a lot of people are running 3 copies of Bran anyways, so chances are you are going to see Bran before you're going to see Hodor. Along with the positives, we do have a few negatives with Hodor. First and foremost, he is extremely vulnerable to First Snow. He has no intrigue icon, so he is not natively immune to Tears of Lys. And he only has 4 strength, so obviously he can be hit by Dracarys or Confinement. So none of those things are very good. I also want to point out he has the Companion trait. But in 1.0, there was a negative trait that a bunch of cards had that was the Ally trait. So Ally wasn't in and of itself inherently bad, but it did provide a lot of synergy to cards that affected the cards that had the Ally trait. So, for example, there was a card called Dissension that would discard an ally. Or there was other characters that had an ability that said, when you marshal this character, discard one of your opponent's allies. And that seems to be the direction that FFG is going with Companion. I noticed that Syrio was also an ally in 1.0, and in 2.0 he is a companion. Hodor was an ally in 1.0, and he is now a companion as well. So it seems like potentially this companion trait could be the new 2.0 version of ally, but I have a strong suspicion that is where that FFG is going with this trait. So if and when they do introduce some sort of companion hate, that's going to have to temper your feelings towards Hodor. And finally, let's talk about his competition in the cost slot. So the things that Hodor is competing with for 2 gold in a typical Stark deck is going to be the Kennel Master, the Tumblestone Knight, the Hedge Knight, and the Direwolf Pup. I believe Hodor is a better inclusion in most decks than all of those cards. He's also going to be competing with the Wildling Scout. Now, an argument can be made that the Wildling Scout is better out of Stark for 2 gold than Hodor. I generally think they're about equal. On paper, I think clearly Hodor is the better card, but specifically out of Stark, because the Wildling Scout has that green icon, it's generally going to be more valuable out of Stark. So I would say they're about equal. The only card in the 2 cost slot that I think Hodor is worse than is Bran, to be honest. So I think when we take all the positives and the negatives and mash them all up, I think Hodor is easily a 1x in every single Stark deck moving forward. Okay, so the only other dedicated Stark card in this pack is the Wardens plot. We have the Wardens of the North. Now, some history of this when I was doing research for this episode. I was not aware of this, but Wardens of the North was a CCG era plot. It was a 302, completely different from the form that this plot is taking today. But I'll put the CCG cards up here so you can see just for historical value. But what I think this plot is mostly representing in what FFG is doing is sort of mimicking 1.0's Fury series. So for you 2.0 players that don't know, in 1.0 there was a series of plots for each house called the Furies. They were a 5-7-1, each house had their own, and they all did completely different things, but generally in the same vein. So if you won a certain type of challenge against a certain type of house, you were able to trigger an effect. They all had the same stat line, so every house had their own, and that seems to be the direction that FFG is going with the Wardens plot. So I did see that the Lannister Wardens plot that's already been released has a different stat line than the Wardens of the North. The Lannister's Wardens plot is a 5-4-1. The Wardens of the North is a 5-5-1, but I generally expect every house to get their own Wardens plot after seeing these two. Just a educated guess. But Stark's plot specifically says, during a challenge in which you control a participating Stark character, kneel another Stark character to have it participate in that challenge on your side. This is incredible. It mimics another mechanic from 1.0 that was called Naval that was introduced towards the end. Essentially, an icon could have a naval enhancement on it, which meant that after attackers were declared, as one of your player actions, if you were in a challenge type that you had a naval enhancement on that icon, that character could just kneel into that challenge as a defender or an attacker, just because, as an action, not as the typical declaring attacker or defender. So that was incredibly useful in terms of getting around stealth, in terms of dealing with surprise buffs later in the challenge. But I wanted to highlight some of the positives and negatives of this card, specifically in 2.0 versus 1.0, even though the mechanic is pretty much the same. So, I mean, the main positive is that you get to commit to a challenge after attackers and defenders are declared. So, if you make a chump challenge with a 1-strength character and they defend for 3, you now have the option of saying, I really want to win this, so I'm going to include another character. You get to see what they're defending with before you decide what you want to attack with. For an additional character, that is. And same thing with defense. If you defend up to enough strength that you're winning the challenge and they buff their attacking character, you can include another defending character to make sure that you win. It just gives you incredible versatility in your challenge defense. And with the stat line of 551, you can't really complain about that. With an effect this powerful, I would have expected the stat line to be much, much worse. You're also, just by having it revealed, forcing your opponent, if he needs to win a particular challenge type, he's going to be forced to overcommit. Because now he has to account for you being able to include characters that don't even have that icon in that challenge. And speaking of that, that brings up an interesting thing, that you can now include a very powerful Stark card in a challenge that she normally cannot participate in, and that is Caitlyn. So if you are afraid of a put to the sword, or something of that nature, all you have to do is use this plot to put Caitlyn into the military challenge, and now you don't have to worry about those puts to the sword because she's going to prevent it. I really, really think the most underrated thing about this plot is its 5 initiative. I think 6 initiative has sort of been a pretty safe number where if you drop that, you're probably going to win initiative. 5 is obviously worse, but very, very good. I would not feel uncomfortable throwing a 5 initiative plot in this game right now. I think you're pretty likely to win initiative at that, depending on the time that you throw it. And the more that I play 2.0, the more I think initiative it gets more and more important the more and more I play, and I'm realizing that. It wasn't all that important in 1.0 until you were about to close on a specific turn to make sure that you could go first. But really, the nuance of 2.0 and the struggle for that initial board control is so tense that whether or not you go first, that decision matters so, so much. So I really like the 5 initiative on this plot. The 5 reserve, I understand it. Everything else about the card is so good. I understand why they had to do 5 reserve. I don't really like that. I like to have reserve of 6 or better, if possible, on most of my plots. But 5 is understandable given how incredible the rest of the plot is. It is a plot deck limit of 1. I think FFG is doing that on the more powerful plots as to sort of keep a checks and balances thing, which I like. So I'm okay with that. I understand it. Another thing you can do with the ability is to essentially nullify stealth. So if your opponent has stealth, yes, he can stealth certain characters, but because you can essentially include anybody that you want in any challenge type, regardless of icon, stealth doesn't really matter anymore. Other than the 5 reserve, I can't really think of a whole lot of downside to this plot and why most Stark decks wouldn't want to include it. Very, very easy to recommend including this in any Stark plot deck. So what do you guys think about the Stark cards? Are you excited about them? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree with my assessment? I want to hear what you have to think, so leave a comment below, and let's talk about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this review of the Stark cards, and stay tuned for the rest of the houses.